Well, my favorite book by an African-American author, and it's the book that turned me on to English as a profession, is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. I read the book first as a college freshman. And what connected me immediately to Zora Neale Hurston was first I read the biography, the biographical information about her, and found out that she had at one point lived in Jacksonville, and her fiction was set in Florida, and so that was an immediate tie-in. But once I opened the novel, I was just pulled into the story of Janie Crawford, her challenges that she has in finding her voice as a woman, and I believe also possibly as an artist. And the world in which she sets her fiction is a world that was immediately identifiable to me. I grew up as the daughter of a woman from South Carolina who grew up in a house of 14 siblings. And so when I would go back to visit my family in South Carolina, a lot of the time was spent around tables, telling stories, exploring our adventures, remembering some of the folklore that my mother grew up around. And so when I saw the same thing in this novel, I felt for once that I found a place for myself, a representation for myself in this story. Now, this novel is told as a frame narrative. So at the beginning, we have a mature Janie coming back from burying her third husband. Through a series of events, the one she loved the most ends up dying. And so she comes back and she's telling her best friend the story of her life, basically. And so the passage I just come back to time and time again is Janie's initial experience when she's 16, and she's experiencing nature and love and romance, and she sees everything around her coupling up, the bees, the birds, everything, and so she's wondering where's hers. And so this is the passage. Oh, to be a pear tree, any tree in bloom, with kissing bees singing of the beginning of the world. She was 16. She had glossy leaves and bursting buds, and she wanted to struggle with life, but it seemed to elude her. Where were the singing bees for her? Nothing on the place nor in her grandma's house answered her. She searched as much of the world as she could from the top of the front steps, and then went down to the front gate and leaned over to gaze up and down the road, looking, waiting, breathing short with impatience, waiting for the world to be made. Through pollinated air, she saw a glorious being coming up the road. In her former blindness, she had known him as shiftless Johnny Taylor, tall and lean. That was before the golden dust of pollen had beglamored his rags and her eyes. In the last stages of Nanny's sleep, she dreamed of voices, voices far off but persistent, and gradually coming nearer. Janie's voice, Janie talking in whispering snatches with a male voice she couldn't quite place. That brought her wide awake. She bolted upright and peered out a window and saw Johnny Taylor lacerating her Janie with a kiss. And this speaks to me as I've read this novel throughout the last 20 or so years. Every time I read it, I see something different. That's a hallmark, I think, of a classic. By the time she gets to the end of the novel and she has this other friendship with Phoebe, the line that sticks out, and I think about it often, when she turns to Phoebe and says, now I'm going to tell you my story because everybody around me in this small town wants to know where I've been and what I've done. So my mouth, my story, my tongue is in my friend's mouth. And so I'm giving you this narrative. Whether you use it, tell it, keep it to yourself, is really up to you. But it is my story. It's not the story someone else wanted me to tell. And that's a hard lesson. And I think that's what makes the story relevant even today. The wisdom of learning to tell your own story and how hard a struggle that can be, but how worth it at the end.